Use like a massage gun on any area of the joint, especially around the synovial joint, whether that's the hips, the shoulders, the elbows, like most any joint throughout the body. You put vibrational therapy around the joint, and then for smaller joints, lighter, larger joints, more firm, to help with the synovial fluid, like lubrication. So you could go either localized, or you stand on a whole vibration platform, which shakes the whole body, which you need definitely higher rate in which your body can vibrate. For most people has better effects the higher the frequency is. So you can go through full body mobilization, mobility workspaces to help aid in also that synovial fluid and joint lubrication.
I'd play music over that so that I was hearing the frequency. My subconscious was picking it up, but I could still at least pay attention to the music. But yeah, and I could definitely notice a difference. Like, I hated just listening to music when I studied now. Like, I always, whenever I'm reading or I put it on.
Wow.
And for me, it is a huge difference for focus, attention, staying on task, making sure I'm reading and not just like flipping page, like that kind of thing. Makes a huge difference.
Ladies and gentlemen, put down your energy drinks and increase those beta waves.
Seriously, man.
That's amazing.
Welcome to the Functional Code, your go-to source for decoding optimal health. Join Dr. Addy and Dr. Jace as they break down the science behind pain, performance, longevity, and more, making complex concepts easy for you to understand and apply in your life. Your journey to a healthier you begins with understanding the Functional Code.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Functional Code. We are super excited to bring to you guys today an awesome episode. We're going to be talking about frequencies in the human body and how we can affect our body with vibration and sound frequencies, and then what that does to us. We are super excited to bring this to you guys today. As always, I am Dr. Addy.
And I am Dr. Jace. Yeah, we're going to dive into everything from the different frequencies in which the human body can be perceived, and also what the human body gives off in terms of the electrical signals. Then we're going to be diving into PEMF therapy, Rife therapy, and then different ways in terms of which vibration therapy can aid in the healing process. Then into the sound therapy. There's also a couple gems in there in terms of clearing out and trying to aid in ringing the ears, or tinnitus as well. So there's a lot of gems in this one, Doc. Let's dive into just the frequencies in the human body.
Yes.
And I know there's different parts that the human body can perceive, but what have you found with that specific area?
So what's interesting is I probably at one point in time learned about this, I would hope, in physiology, but I forgot all about this until I had actually met someone who uses a product, and I'll try to be as vague as possible so we aren't getting censored, but uses a product that is a patch on the skin. What it does is it helps to redirect the light, infrared light. Well, it's not really infrared, it's ultra weak photon emissions is what it's called, but it helps to redirect that light back towards us, and that can actually be therapeutic.
Interesting.
And so I kind of first heard, or I guess was reminded about humans as light. And so I was looking into this, and I was excited to look into this because I wanted to know more about it after hearing about that. And so what are they called? It's called Bio Photons, and we call that the light that is emitted by the human body. And it's, like I said, ultra weak photon emissions from living cells during metabolic processes, and it's emitted as a natural byproduct of cellular biochemical reactions.
Interesting, okay.
Yes, and primarily it is due from oxidative metabolism in mitochondria. And so the mitochondria are big emitters of light, which makes sense. They're the ones that are, emitting, or I guess harnessing, using a lot of energy. The photons themselves fall within visible and ultraviolet spectrum, but are so faint, obviously they're invisible to the naked eye. Now, one thing that I kind of wanted to touch on, just a few of the, I guess, the processes that these are generated. One would be reactive oxygen species that are generated during metabolic processes, and we've heard about reactive oxygen species as things that are created under stress. And we know that antioxidants are what can come in and help to eliminate these things. So that was one thing. Another one was lipid perioxidation, which is just basically the damage to cell membranes that happen during oxidative reactions. Again, light is produced. And then lastly, this one was interesting, flavins and porphyrins, which are molecules that are in cells, actually return to their ground state from an excited state when photons are released. And so basically there is a important process to grounding certain parts of our cells by the emittance of photons. And so I don't want to get too deep into that, but just I didn't realize how much the light emission can actually create and is important to the biological functions of our body.
So it gives off this energy which has a light frequency,
Yep.
which gives us the appearance of what we perceive through our eyes into whatever structure is that is being made.
Yes. And so what the most fun part of all this is the biological functions of biophotons. And evidence suggests that it may play a role in intercellular communication. Cells actually may be using light as a signaling mechanism, transmitting information about metabolic states or oxidative stress to other cells.
Interesting. I think in a later podcast, we were talking on this prior to, we're going to get into light and eyes and all
light
that stuff.
therapy.
Yeah.
I don't think this would have been, it would have been way too long to input in there, but
A little deep.
no, I mean, when I started looking into all this, I mean, it
Interesting.
opened up feel like a new world of what our bodies are, and I had no idea on this stuff. Biophoton emissions may influence DNA and protein synthesis, cell division, and other cellular activities. And lastly, studies show that biophoton emission increases under stress, inflammation, and oxidative damage, making it a potential non-invasive diagnostic tool.
Interesting.
Obviously, we're nowhere near any type of technology that picks this stuff up. I think this is all theory, but we do have some evidence showing this. So, yeah, it's crazy.
Mitochondria health.
Yeah, and it makes sense with we know that we talk about like light, we are light as humans, and we react to light, just in the simple case of sunlight on our bodies and just the amount of effects it has on us.
Yes.
That simple theory alone can probably be taken down an incredible amount of rabbit hole research, but just that alone was super exciting. And then if we switch gears a little bit, so we still have more research on the electrical impulses that the body gives off and uses as an electric machine, we'll call it.
Yes.
And so that is more easily, I guess, measured. And so in a great example would be in our brain. So our brain would generate different types of these electrical signals. Just depends on what state we are in. So, and we're going to get deeper into each of those states, but certain electrical impulses are generated for cognition, for mood, for sleep. And we know that sleep is, especially there's a specific one called delta waves that we know are emitted during sleep. And that is something that we can measure quite well using EEGs and things like that. But you look at other parts of the body, such as the heart. The heart emits very strong electrical signals, obviously, because it's constantly working and beating, and it needs this rhythmic contraction in order to continue to do its job. And then lastly, we know through muscle and nerves, that's how nerves communicate. Well, that's how the brain, I guess, communicates via the nerves to muscles and other things. Muscles, we know, needs an action potential to create a contraction in order for us to move and do what we want voluntarily. And then, of course, there's other involuntary movements. So, but we do know that bioelectricity is actually essential for wound healing, cellular repair, and tissue regenerations because electrical fields generated by cells guide the migration of repair cells to the site of injury.
Electrical fields.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that was actually a part of the process. I knew that there was signals that needed to be sent. And I didn't know that not only was chemically we had signals being sent, but electrically we do as well. And so I didn't know that.
Even from like the influence out from the external stimuli. I think that's, as we're going to get into this more further, like that P, and how just even those signals can then influence the body based on how close you are to whatever electrical field I think you find yourself in. You can get, God, I think we're going to get a little deeper on some of this stuff too, but yeah, it's interesting that it's the cells migrate based on almost like a certain frequency
Yes.
to a certain extent.
Yep.
With electrical fields. Yeah, I just never thought about it from that perspective. It's
Right.
almost like just like,
Like when you think about it in general, like obviously massage over an area generates
Yes.
electrical signals to be sent via the receptors in the skin, and then that of course is going to the brain's going to pick that up, the bombardment of receptors. We're going to know that change is going to be created. We'll have less pain, like all those things. But the fact that cells themselves have their own EMFs that create change in signals, that I didn't understand at the deeper level.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Because that's interesting. Because then we think about it as is there a even smaller ecosystem of language in our body that we just haven't even picked up yet? Which I'm going to say yes, because we're learning about the body every single day. But the fact that there might be a like quantum level of communication that's going on that we're just like completely unaware of, that's just fun to think about.
So if you are thinking about it almost like cords from one thing connecting to another thing, like any technology would have.
Yep.
But those cords then can pick up different signals via like a Wi-Fi at different parts of the cord to affect different other things.
And then the cords can actually talk to each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like as if back in the day, I don't even know how to explain it, but your dial-up modem could talk to your phone and vice versa, or your iPhone charger could talk to your computer charger and help each other out. I don't know, like something like that. I don't know.
Dude, we're getting deep real quick.
It's interesting. It's really interesting. So we know that, like I said, it's essential for wound healing, cellular repair, but not only that, they know that during embryogenesis, or the creation of the embryo, there are bioelectric patterns that help shape the body's structure and guide the growth of organs and tissues, which we'll get to in a little bit. But each organ and tissue does have certain frequencies that it runs at, or is electrically tuned to.
Yes.
And I know you kind of just brought that part up. And then lastly, they have measured abnormal bioelectric signals that have been linked to tumor growth. And researchers are exploring this, due to how do you manipulate these signals to inhibit or cause cancer.
Interesting.
But that's been kind of the most interesting part diving into this so far, is this lower, I guess, a smaller ecosystem of communication that these cells might be having, and then how can we understand it and measure it, and then how do we influence it? But going on to something, EMFs by themselves, EMFs, think of it as just charged particles or ions within or between cells, and then you can, measure what these frequencies emit as far as like a field of, magnetic measurement. So we generate our own EMFs, and it can be picked up by things like what are called an MEG for the brain, or an MCG for the heart. Like you said, now different brain states bring upon different electromagnetic frequencies. Again, brain and heart. And then lastly, resonance and frequency interaction. So the human body frequencies can potentially interact with external EMFs, sound waves, or light, which can influence physiological or psychological states. We know this. Light therapy, transcranial magnetic stimulation, sound therapy. We're going to be talking about PEMF, Rife, all the other things. We do know and have seen this in experiment, the body reacting to these certain kinds of things as well. So,
Interesting. Yeah.
Basically, I'd ended it with saying that researchers have proposed the idea of quantum coherence, is what it's called, from the body's biophoton emissions, which might allow for highly efficient information transfer across cells and tissues.
Yeah, that's a really good name.
Quantum coherence.
I mean, it makes sense, yeah. And I think that's,
And so when I first learned about I'm jumping ahead, but we will talk on this, but the Rife machine, when I first learned about how the body reacts to other frequencies. So when I started looking into this, I was able to find that they have studied different organs that have different specific frequencies as far as like resonance. And so
okay, thank you.
the brain approximately is running at 72 to 90 millihertz, and that's its measured frequency.
Okay.
So the brain is 72 to 90, heart is 67 to 70, the liver is approximately 55 to 60, the kidneys are 60 to 80, and the lungs are 58 to 65. So I guess not only Rife, but PEMF is the same way, because you can change the hertz settings on the PEMF machines. And what's interesting is one of the more common, because I've used PEMF in practice, 55 is a very common, I think it's 52 or 55, and then 72 is another common one. So I see brain and liver on there.
Yeah.
And so we had that setting, quite a bit.
Okay.
And so for those who don't understand what PEMF is, PEMF stands for Pulsed Electromagnetic Field. And what it is been studied for is potential, for improving not only the musculoskeletal health, but organ health and other things, even bone health, improving bone improvement, resorption, fractures, things like that. So the way that it works is through something called Faraday's Law. Doc, and you want to just quickly touch on what that is for the listeners, and maybe how that works for PEMF therapy?
So with Faraday's Law, briefly speaking for the overview without going too deep, I just thought it was something that it was interesting and something I learned with this pulsed electromagnetic field, or PEMF therapy. It pretty much induces the electromotive force, or EMF, in a closed loop, which directly and proportionally affects the rate of magnetic influx through loops. So it's almost like the magnetic charge in between different types of forces, whether it's the force of the body versus the force of the frequency. That's where when you see these mats, these EMF mats, they can influence the body, especially in closer proximity, and ideally skin to pad. They have a better effect and connection between these two forces to create that magnetic loop.
Yeah.
Would be probably the best way I could explain it.
The way that certain people have explained it to me is when our cells are in a certain just state, there's different ions in and outside the cell. And if you were to put an EMF field next to our cell that was looking to influence the cell's own EMF, it actually can create an ionic change to the cell and causes more influx of those ions in and out of the cell.
Well stated.
And with the change of ions in and out of the cell, waste products actually follow. So what they found was when you put PEMF at a cellular level next to a cell, the influx and outflux of ions changed, and more waste products were actually being increased out of the cell due to the change of, like you said, the magnetic flow. And so that's what they found. And I said, I don't know, depending on the amount of millihertz, what each setting does for each cell / organ / tissue, and that's where I think we'll have a lot more information maybe one day on that. But so far, I think they have a pretty decent start. I know there's plenty of settings on these machines that do correlate to a certain part of the body if you want, and you can use that. And I have used it. Many patients, I love it. I know you've used it. We'll probably get to our own experiences too, but this isn't just voodoo. Like, a lot of this does have some decent backing of solid research in theory, and absolutely has been measured on patients, not just animal studies as well. So with PEMF, if you want to get a little bit more, accustomed to what it can help with, I put on, a fair amount of, I would say maybe 7 or 8 different cases / studies that, showed change in a certain condition. I'm sure there's a lot more that people have, used this on. I know I have, and I wish I could get to every single one of them, but what I do know is almost everyone we use it on sees some kind of change. And I know that for me, it was one of my favorite therapies to use every day in clinic. And it was something that I can't wait to have again now that, I've got to witness and feel that and realize how much I miss it, not having it. So the first one is which I believe is one of the biggest ones as far as studies for PEMF, which is about 1,200 patients that had osteoarthritis. And it showed that it significantly reduced pain, improved physical function, especially in knee osteoarthritis. And treatment was anywhere from 15 to 90 days. So some were short-term, some were more longer-term. But all in all, even in 15 days, they saw short-term,
That's
change using PEMF therapy, which I think is great. We still need more short-term non-drug approaches.
Yes.
And so I thought that was great. The next one for non-specific low back pain, again, concluded very effective for reducing pain, improving function in these patients. There was another one, I believe, that had around, for back pain, like 700 participants in one study that I put on there. Again, these are decently very large size trials. And we know that this wasn't just a cohort of like 6 people. And next, bone healing and fracture. So this was on a study of tibial fractures that basically had a non-union. It had not been closed yet. This was 34 patients with tibial non-unions, found it significantly increased the union rate compared to placebo in enhancing bone healing processes. Next one was for ankle instability. So now we're talking about improving ligamentous instability and trying to improve actual joint stability. It showed that in the short term and long term, there was increased functional outcomes and obviously improvement in the stability of the ankle. The next was interstitial cystitis, or what's also known as bladder pain syndrome. Interstitial cystitis, I'm sure if you've had, or many of you know, it's a certain part of the lining in the wall of the bladder that is inflamed. And it can feel as though you either don't fully release all of the urine when you urinate, or it does feel like it's swollen and you always feel full. And it can also be very painful. And it happens, females get this usually either after pregnancy or even, before. It even actually can improve with pregnancy because it ends up stretching the pelvis wall out, and it can improve it for temporary time. So they're finding that it's still something that a lot of people deal with, and there's not much that they're finding to improve it. But in this specific study, it showed the ability to decrease bladder and pelvic pain as well as other urinary symptoms associated with the condition. And it has been shown in not only certain studies, but randomized double-blinded placebo-controlled trials to decrease the output of pro-inflammatory proteins, improve oxygenation of blood and tissue, stabilize the action potential and ion channels in those bladder cells, and then stimulate tissue regeneration, all of which are obviously going to improve either cellular damage that's happening in this and all of the symptoms that are associated. So I thought that was really great for a condition that doesn't usually see a lot of change with certain therapies that are out there so far.
So instead of going the chemical route where most medical doctors will prescribe something for the inflammation, going the electromagnetic route,
and this is
multiple
where
studies.
I can't wait to advance in.
That's
and where people are just using this day to day.
So what would you call this state? So it's almost between not physical, chemical, but like electromagnetic. That's a whole field.
It is because it plays on both. Because we know that certain EMF output can change chemical output too.
Yeah.
So you have the it's almost electrochemical. Electrochemical.
Okay.
In a way. And I just think that, some of the cases I'll share briefly with what I have experienced. Gentlemen that have enlarged prostates who have a tough time urinating because of it, we use that on almost every one of those. And over 80% had a reduction in their pain and symptoms.
How long did it take till you start seeing
roughly 6 sessions was
wow.
a pretty typical time. A little bit more if depending on the severity of the case.
How long did they have it on or used for?
We would do 30 to 45 minute sessions.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. And so that one itself was super great. Women who had, specifically women, because it's more common with thyroid issues.
Okay.
We would put it around the thyroid, and we'd see changes metabolically and improvements in some of their symptoms that they were getting. Graves' disease, hypothyroid, trouble losing weight, like metabolic things like that.
So is that where you match certain frequencies?
So we had certain, that's how we would do it. We, depending on the area, we would choose a certain frequency. And my guess is the inventors of the machine has a certain frequency that they kind of would use for a certain part of the body. We also played around a little bit. We had our own kind of protocols, but we would use it on the head for headaches, migraines. We would use it on people's eyes for eye degeneration.
Do they have to like keep their eyes opened?
You can do it closed. Yep, you could do it closed.
Right, yeah.
It wasn't anything that needed, you didn't have to have it open. You also, it's not like there's light or anything, because it's just basically a magnetic paddle. We would use it on liver. We'd use it on stomach. I loved it on my stomach. I use it on my stomach all the time.
Sweet.
Like, that was incredible. The most profound, I guess, thing that happened to me is whenever I used to sit for a long period of time, I'd get numbness all the way down both my legs.
Sure.
Like, constantly. Airplane rides were miserable for me. Long car rides, sitting, studying, and it would be sometimes 15 minutes. And I needed to study for 4 or 5 hours. And I started using it. I'd use there's a chair setting where it's like a full lined chair of the PEMF.
Yeah.
And so I would just sit in it.
Oh, beautiful.
And when I started using it, it only took me about a month or two. I never had that symptom again.
Wow.
I still don't ever have that symptom.
Interesting.
And I don't know if I can fully correlate it to just that, but I know that I needed help. I started using it, and then I had a plane ride in like a month or two, and on that plane, it was the first time it had never done anything like that.
Do you know if there's any studies with neuropathy and PEMF?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know about studies, but we used it on neuropathy.
And
we used it.
Yeah.
That was, we definitely, when we started with neuropathy, it was one of the most important parts to the protocol.
Okay.
Now, we then found even more effective therapies. So we actually didn't use it as much for neuropathy specifically. However, it didn't change us still using it for the umpteenth other things we were still using it for. But in cases of neuropathy, we definitely found some different things. And no, it's so then, fast forward into kind of the other, frequency machines we were using. This is the what was called the Rife machine. That was, and I still had a tougher time understanding how it worked, but I guess the way that they're explaining it now, they didn't explain it this way back in the day, but the creators of this machine, I think, are trying to, market it more and have a little bit of more understanding. And so they do call it PEMF now. I don't know, back in the day, we were never actually told that that's what it was.
Interesting.
So, but how this works is, and we'll kind of go back into a story really quickly. I'll try not to make it too long, but the inventor, his name was Dr. Royal Rife, and I think he was born in 1888.
Okay.
I mean, this is like way back in the day.
Wow.
And he dove right into the beginning of the microscope and the advancements of the microscope. And he created what was called the universal microscope, which had, at that time, like 17,000 times more powerful than any other microscope. Wow. And so he was able to see things first than a lot of other individuals because of just the magnification that he was able to get to. Now, he created this hypothesis, and I don't know if it's still accepted today or not, but he called it a mortal oscillatory rate. And what he saw and theorized was each pathogen. So he was studying pathogens, bacteria, viruses, all these things.
Sure.
He started with cancer.
Okay.
But then he kind of went into other things. But he saw that these pathogens would basically oscillate at a certain rate, and some would oscillate slower, and some would oscillate faster.
Interesting.
And he was like, each bacteria and or virus pathogen have a certain frequency or oscillatory rate? And he would study that, and he did. He created a catalog of all the pathogens that he studied, and it had a certain oscillatory rate that he put at. Then he said,
Interesting.
could I, in theory, put frequencies towards those pathogens and destroy them?
Ooh.
Could you actually, like the tuning fork idea?
Yes.
Where if you hit a tuning fork and you don't have one that you hit over here and you bring them together, they won't, if they're the same frequency, they'll start to oscillate.
Yes.
Could you bring a very strong frequency next to a virus that has a similar, and it like basically, oscillate it so much that it's destroyed? He started doing that and it worked.
Damn.
Now,
Oh my.
he said it worked.
Okay, sure.
However, if you look back on a lot of his research, his skepticism and just like he was not accepted, and all these things to suppress his discoveries, pharmaceutical companies, like you name it,
Of course,
it did it. But you can still read his work, and this is kind of what he brought up. So it ended up, unfortunately, he fell into legal and financial troubles because of how much he was being suppressed, and his work fell into obscurity, and so I think he passed away in the 70s. There was, I believe, a book that came out later that kind of explained a little bit of what he did and used in research, but basically all of this was killed in the 70s, and so that's why there isn't many people who know about the machine itself.
Wow. And that book was called the Cancer Cure That Worked.
Yeah. And I have yet to read the book, but again, super amazing story. So really, if you look at the machine itself, you can go on to true, like not false, but truerife.com.
Okay.
And you can still buy these machines, and you can, if you look at the website, it's very modern. I know that they're doing well as far as people getting help, because they obviously still have the funds over. Yes. I think my guess is they've been selling this machine since the 90s again, and I've known about it since the early 2000s, late 2000s. And for the fact that I can still go on the website and it's modern, and you can now get, like, they obviously are helping people and doing the things that we don't always have the idea on yet. But so get to the fun part. What were they using this on?
Yes.
So the machine itself, I know it has like 2,400 different settings, and so it's got. Okay. If you know the bacteria that you have, if you know the virus you have, if you know like all these things,
that's crazy.
They definitely have a protocol for the C word, and we were using it immensely for that. Okay. But yeah, you turn the machine on. The frequency itself is emitted through a external wand or kind of a tube, and then you use certain crystals in the tubes, and I know I say crystals like as kind of the voodoo crystals, but it's nothing like that. These crystals are specific to help amplify frequency, and so when you use these certain wands or tubes that have these crystals, it just allows it to emit the frequency further and farther. So that way you don't have to basically sleep with the tube next to you.
That makes sense.
So great experience story for me. When I had a really bad upper respiratory issue, we were using certain protocols for it. And I remember when I first started using it, I started getting like tingling in my chest, and I started to cough, and I coughed, and I coughed, and I coughed, and I coughed throughout the entire treatment. Like I couldn't not cough. I could feel this, I don't know what it was, but it almost felt like I had like tiny bubbles that were breaking inside of my lungs, and it was very irritating. And so I had to continue to cough, and I coughed. And this respiratory issue that I had for like 2 weeks, it didn't go away. When using the Rife, 2 days.
Wow.
I was I don't want to say healed, but drastically far less symptoms than I had. And that was just one experience.
Wow.
All the other things that we've used it on, again, is we use it a lot on patients who are sick, acute issues, viral, bacterial, other kinds of things. But this, to this state, 2,400 different settings. I know there's plenty of cancer settings on there. I never played around with that, but I know people have.
Wow.
So that's all I can say about that.
it's baffling that it's not more widespread, that more people don't know about it.
Yeah.
Which,
And so like
thank
chronic
God for
Lyme
this, but-
disease caused by the bacteria from a tick, that one was huge. Infections and HIV we used it on, that's viral. You use it on wounds that were, infected, all these other things. I could go down the list again. I could go. But yeah, if you are interested in looking that up, like I said, go on the website. It's it's not like it's suppressed or anything. You can go and look at the website. You can get all the information there. If you want more information, I'm sure you can contact their support staff that has more information. I'm sure they try to not put too much information on the website, but yeah, I would recommend it because it's a great machine.
That's incredible, and God, I would love to try this on myself, quite frankly. So if anyone that has a Rife machine is in Arizona, let us know.
I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are.
Probably just gotta look it up online.
Yeah.
Honestly, man. Okay, so in terms of the electrical magnetic effect on the body, to switch up to a different frequency in terms of vibrational therapies. Yep. Now, this can be a whole array of things in terms of how the body perceives anything from the sensory input of vibration to the body, and we'll get to the sound frequency as well. But there's actually one study. The study was called the Conceptual Model for Low Frequency Vibration on Joint Mobility Restoration. So they pretty much went into this, and some of the main facts were its effects on the mechanoreceptors and the sensitivity. So it's how well certain types of either light touch, vibration, firm touch is picked up on the skin. So when they looked at the frequency range for specifically mechanoreceptors is anywhere from 10 to 200 hertz.
Okay.
So then you can start playing around with the healing and rehab purposes, especially do you want to more or less induce these Meissner corpuscles, which are pretty much just specific mechanoreceptors that are within the skin that relay either light touch, vibration, and that can respond in 2 to 40 hertz. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then the other aspect opposed to Meissner's corpuscles, which would also be Pacinian corpuscles, which are, again, another sensory receptor,
Yep.
a little more deeper in the dermal layer, but they respond to deep pressure vibration and then fine different textures, which can be essential for proprioception or where you find your body in space. So in terms of vibration therapy itself, when you look at any massage therapy work, that's where you can start to almost start playing around with these different types of frequency of the vibration. Do you have to be lighter? Do you have to be firmer? Do you need to go in a specific rate or direction? I think all that absolutely matters in terms of either scar tissue or fibrous adhesions in comparison to a condition that a person may have.
Yeah.
So there's different things and ways that you can go about it, but the interesting part with some of this is the effects it has with either muscle stimulation, to where you can get these small vibration which can cause the muscles to contract, thus also enhancing the blood flow.
Mm-hmm.
But they also have just even the fact that the muscles contract and relax will actually have a metabolic effect as well, which brings more chemicals to the area for the area to heal, wounds to heal, and then getting lymphatic drainage out of there with the muscle contractions and movements. And that's where if you start getting vibrations greater than 50 hertz, it helps increase blood flow and lymphatic drainage, which I'm sure the higher frequency to a certain point will have only so much better effects before it kind of levels off or doesn't affect it at all. So there's that. And then this is where I went into a little bit more in depth. In terms of joint health for vibration, a lot of the research was stating that it helps with the promotion of exchange in the synovial fluid, which helps for lubrication, mobility of the joints.
Nice.
But theorizing that if you use a massage gun on any area of the joint, especially around the synovial joint, whether that's the hips, the shoulders, the elbows, most any joint throughout the body, you put vibrational therapy around the joint, and then for smaller joints, lighter, larger joints, more firm, to help with the synovial fluid, like lubrication. So you could go either localized, or you stand on a whole vibration platform, which shakes the whole body, which you need definitely higher rate in which your body can vibrate. For most people has better effects the higher the frequency is. So you can go through full body mobilization, mobility workspaces to help aid in also that synovial fluid and joint lubrication aspect too. So again, theorizing, but that would be something that if you guys want to start thinking about osteoarthritis or any of those conditions, that would be an idea that you can probably start bringing up.
And I know those who use those kinds of machines for that specifically, and know that they mix change.
And it makes sense too. I know we have some in office ourselves. Then there's different research. If it shakes equally on both sides versus back and forth, side to side has a better effect on the body versus both at the same time, probably based on how the body was constructed, based on like how we walk, and you step one foot in front, the other one back, same with the arms, vice versa, in terms of like a rotational capability.
Sure.
But yeah, that was just something kind of interesting there. But and then the last physiological effect that it can have for vibrational therapy is the cellular activation, to where it can actually improve ATP metabolism, or just how the body creates this energy exchange. And there's even studies showing 90% suppression of actin-myosin activity after 30 minutes of exposure, but the effects are reversible within 5 to 30 minutes afterwards. So
that is suppressing contraction?
I believe so. Spasms,
yeah.
but that it is reversible. So if you want to increase the healing rate, you have anywhere upwards of like 30 minutes to create those changes. So if you create the change to decrease the spasm, create mobility around it, so you have the communication from your brain down to the tissues, so it doesn't have that reversibility from there. So
take advantage of the extra motion and movement you have now and utilize it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, with this whole vibration, just even the study itself, I thought it was awesome, because it broke down so many different like physiological effects, even to some of the recovery aspects as well. It can also have affecting more or less pain sensation throughout the whole body. I know there's been positive effects with fibromyalgia as well, but I think that it has more of the communication from vibration down to those deep sensory neurons to aid also with the pretty much those C-reactive fibers, are how you pick up the pain, noxious stimuli more so. I think it just downregulates that threshold, which helps from that side of things. It would be my assumption.
Yeah.
There could be some stuff in terms of the higher brain centers there, but also we're finding it actually improves with bone health, which obviously we know with osteoporosis.
Yeah. I'd say that might be the more
falls.
common one people associate vibration therapy with.
Absolutely. If you want to increase and prevent higher risk for osteoporosis or that getting worse, stand on a vibration platform. Maybe load yourself just standing there. You can get into certain positional holds would be the best, whether it's just standing, or maybe you're in a push-up position, your hands are on the vibrational platform, or you're in a plank and just your feet are. I think there's a lot of variability. There's probably not as much research, human randomized control trials based on those positions yet, but that's kind of what we're seeing thus far. Let's take this a step further. So we know about the recovery just even from immobilization. After having like any surgery, like let's say you broke a bone and they want to cast it, after immobilization, you want to have a chemical exchange in the area. So vibrational therapy can help for that blood flow, lymphatic drainage in and out, but it can actually be at a lower setting to the pain tolerance, based on obviously recommendation from a physician in terms of where your rate of healing is in that journey from after the surgery. But that will help for the recovery process. Then you add in vibrational therapy with micro movements, whether it's localized, which then not only affects the tissues, but then you would connect the brain into that limb connection as well, which then helps for the recovery process and even coordination there moving forward as well. So, yeah, the interesting part that I thought was kind of fascinating, there was a study with whole body vibration on the autonomic nervous system. And what they looked at this was the whole body vibration was delivered using electromagnetic vibrator in a bed for 5 minutes.
Okay.
And so they measured these physiological effects before and after the vibration stimulus. There's a few things that they noticed. One, the pulse rate increased significantly, which makes sense. However, there was no change occurred in blood pressure.
Okay.
So we have a general understanding for the systemic effect of blood going to and from, but they also found that oxygen consumption increased immediately at the start of vibration, but then gradually decreased as the vibration stopped. So as you apply it, you're going to have oxygen to any joint, so it can accelerate the healing. Again, you want to connect that brain to tissue function as well, thus vibration with workspaces. And then the activation occurred in a sympathetic nerve function, which also increased at the beginning and end of vibrations, but again increased gradually 5 minutes after the end of vibration. So that they started noticing that there's a sympathetic nerve connection even after the stimulation itself. So that's where we're seeing a few different things in terms of more research needing to be done for the specific sympathetic nerve function and what other effects it can have after vibration therapy, especially for humans.
That's interesting. You would think sitting on a calming bed as it's just kind of oscillating, but that's it. That's interesting to me.
I think it probably could affect like the pain sensation, which might feel good, but for the parasympathetic, I suggest,
it's cool to see.
Because I would think too, like if you're standing on a vibration platform, that it could help with the digestion potentially and movement of maybe materials through the stomach.
Right. You're right. Because you need to start hypothesizing that, and maybe it's after 5 minutes.
It could be.
Maybe it's more. Maybe it takes longer to activate. I'm curious looking at that too.
I wish I would have dove into the methods on that specific area a little bit more and like what they actually measured.
Can maybe look that up too.
Yeah. No, that was. So overall, the whole study was interesting to say the least.
So now you translate it to clinical, and kind of what I found, which again, wasn't too thorough, but it kind of just put a few up there which makes sense. These are really the only ones that I even understand as far as effects. But the first one, chronic low back pain, whole body and local vibration therapies can reduce pain, improve function. Same for non-specific low back pain. Stroke rehab, systematic review actually showed that vibration therapy on the upper extremity motor impairment in stroke survivors resulted in significant improvements in motor function and disability recovery using this, which was cool. Gait improvement, so those who can't walk very well, it just showed that vibration was very effective across different groups, because there's a lot of different conditions that affect gait. But it did show that it was beneficial in improving gait parameters across different types of those issues that had gait change, gait issues.
Doc, have you ever used vibration with your gait training?
All the time.
Okay, that's what I thought,
Yeah, we loved it. We did also a lot of balance board versus vibration board too. So the board, it moved a little bit to kind of, so it wasn't so much oscillation as it was change in location too, and it was based on certain positions where the foot was at or needed to heal more or less. So we would have these smaller, and so a lot of people, when they think of platform, like vibration platforms, right?
Yes.
You can also buy vibration boards where they're just a very small square, and so we would have it going, and then we would put patients through obstacle courses, and so as they stepped upon the vibration platform, they would have to then, step on it, hold, do a squat maybe, then come off, and then they would continue. So you can use it in certain ways. Obviously, there's many ways to use it. Obviously, we talked about not only the neurological side of things, but the pain. You just have to know how you're using it. But and then lastly, it said musculoskeletal health in patients with cerebral palsy. Study found that whole body vibration had a positive impact on the strength and spasticity issues that obviously these patients get, meaning their muscles are just a lot tighter from the overactive states of their muscles. And it did support the use as a adjunctive therapy, not a treatment or cure, obviously, to these patients.
So cool.
I thought that was great. And then lastly, actually, I forgot there was one more, which I thought was interesting, which just found that whole body therapy enhanced various cognitive performances in adults. And there was no standardized protocol that was built from this. It just showed that those who were using whole body vibration showed an improvement in cognitive function. Which again, you increase blood flow, oxygenation, it makes sense. But it's cool to see that there was an actual, therapeutic protocol change, for these types of patients. So
Man, some of that stuff I had no idea, because I looked into some of this research for vibrational therapy specifically, probably 3-4 years ago, like really, really in depth. And there wasn't too much out there in terms of the long-term effects of vibrational therapy. But if you start utilizing it in each a clinical setting and in sessions, and then making huge changes during that time frame, that's where it makes sense to create them.
I'm curious if there was a lot of increase in the last years through when like the Theraguns got popular.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a lot of more local research that's currently being done or is about to be done. I remember when there wasn't a Theragun in any store you couldn't go into. Like it was everywhere. And I remember how excited I was because I did like them. I thought they were helpful for certain conditions.
Yeah.
We have them in our clinics, obviously. But yeah, it's interesting. So
true.
Doc, I know I'm excited to get into this one because I think this one is just less studied in a way.
Yep.
But I mean, the profound effects that I think anecdotally people talk about when using these kinds of things. So we're going to be talking about the impact of sound and the frequencies that are associated and how it affects our body. But of course, how do you kind of from experimental theory and hypothesis to clinical use, what does that look like? And then of course, Doc and I have our own experiences we might sprinkle in here and there as well. But so Doc, you want to just talk a little bit about just the effects of sound on certain parts of the body? I know we'll start with neurologic here, but what are they seeing or finding?
Absolutely. So with some of these findings, like Doc said, there's going to be like neurological, there's also going to be with some of these sounds, vibration of how that is being perceived through the inner ear canal. But diving back into the neurological systems, there's a study that they did, I think this was in the 2023. There's a lot of clinical applications to this one, but some of the key points to this study, with any vibration stimulus, it affects the endothelial cells, which are leading to nitric oxide production, which improves blood flow and vascular health. So we know vibration from a chemical standpoint can help incredibly well. Vibropercussion enhances blood clot dissolution, which breaks down blood clots to a certain extent. I think that's also where when you look at ultrasounds helping for blood clots, it also helps for kidney stones as well. It makes sense from that side of things. Also, neurological mechanism, protein kinases, specifically MAPK, and extracellular regulated kinase, or ERK pathways, are also activated, which also promotes in neural differentiation and repair. So the interesting part with this one, the vibratory analgesia reduces pain through gait control theory. There's also vagal nerve stimulation and neurotransmitter modulation. That would be through adenosine, acetylcholine, GABA. So there's the electrical signals affecting chemicals in the body. And then just even from a musculoskeletal health, which we've touched on some of this too, vibration helps for muscle spasms and stretch reflex. But what they found through some of this was the nitric oxide production increased 374% in healthy controls and 236% in diabetic patients with 50 hertz vibrational stimulation. So if you want to induce nitric oxide production in the body, vibration stimulation at 50 hertz will help significantly. Even vibration at 3 hertz for 30 minutes for a post-stroke improves blood flow and reduces heart muscle damage. This was done in animal studies, so
Okay.
obviously curious to see on that for humans. But from a neurological standpoint, we hear these different ranges of hertz. Vibration at 40 hertz helps enhance neural outgrowth and differentiation, which is a strong impact for biomarkers like MAPK and ERK, which I just brought up on that side. Then you look at the musculoskeletal health, upregulation, and this is at 30 to 40 hertz vibration can help promote bone density and mineralization. So there's the bone.
Oh, 30 to 40 hertz. Okay.
hertz. There we go. So that just gives us a good understanding of how the sound and just the frequency of waves can impact the body. Not only that, but just any type of vibrational stimulation in terms of frequency amplification has different effects on different areas of the body, more or less. So
Well, that's exciting. I'm glad we saw that. I just was so curious if that has been studied. That's interesting. So 30 to 40 hertz. I have to look more into that.
God, and a lot of this too. Like this is also regulated from the brain's like waves versus how we perceive certain sound frequencies. So when we go into some of these specifics, there's a lot, like I said, in animals, but a few in humans that I'm trying to bring you so you have just a decent understanding and just even the recommended time when to use certain frequencies, whether it's you turn on a white noise application on your phone. Ideally, you probably want one without ads. That just can interrupt your session, focus, attention, sleep potentially as well. But pretty much the ranges of frequencies. There's like these infrasounds, which is anywhere below 20 hertz. And then there is low frequency sounds, which is anywhere from 20 hertz to 250 hertz.
Okay.
And then it amplifies from there greater than 1,000 hertz and then greater than 20,000 hertz. And that's where ultrasound and different therapies can break up and be more targeted on blood flows, clots, like we already brought up, kidney stones and whatnot. Let's dive into a few of these. And Doc, I know you have some experience in looking with the some of these delta waves, but delta waves are anywhere from 0.5 hertz to 4 hertz in terms of the frequency. So if you want to go into a restful state, the recommended time would be anywhere from 20 to 60 minutes to help promote this deep relaxation. So maybe you want to take a nap, you put on this delta frequency. But let's say you want to go to sleep at night, so you put this frequency on, maybe set a timer on your phone or application to turn off. That can help get you into that deeper state a little easier.
And I know that's pretty easy to go on to YouTube and look up delta wave inducing not music, but like frequency or you know, what have you. And I don't know, unfortunately, how accurate those are. So I'm not sure if there's an actual frequency machine. I know, Doc, you'll obviously get into that, but yes.
So actually, like, I'll dive into it. I looked up these different machines. I'm taking this with a grain of salt, but I know they've had advances and updated versions of this one. This one was specifically through SynHealth, and the thing I thought was kind of interesting that it emanates these specific hertz through in whatever range you want. So you can just type in like 527 or 174 hertz, and then you push OK, and then it emanates that out from here. And that's just in vibrational waves. Now, if you want to accelerate that, you can also put in a speaker and it can emanate the sounds. So it's almost like a type of a hum. So where the lower frequency, it's hard for you to hear, versus the ones that you get to higher frequencies of like 1,000. It's more like a high pitched sound, like versus like the 174 would be a
Oh, sure.
So it kind of goes from like I don't even know how to explain it, a dull, brassy sound to a higher pitch with the higher way it goes in terms of frequency. And I think that's just based on how our ears perceive those wavelengths more or less on that side. But yeah, I'd give that a try. I'm still playing around with this a little bit, but even with certain frequencies, I was talking to Doc about this. I'm like, okay, so I put this in. This has about a 1.5 to 2 meter radius in which the effects it can work on. So this is just naturally playing in the background, but anytime I walk by it, I just feel a sense of like uplifting. And that was at 528 hertz, which I'll get to that as well here in a second. But that one apparently is more of a love frequency, which also helps in DNA repair, stress reduction, and feelings of harmony, which kind of makes sense of me feeling like happy at the time.
I think that's so cool.
So I don't know. But we're playing around with it a little bit here and there. So give that a go if you want to go into this more specifically. But yeah. So we went through delta. Now next is theta waves. And theta waves are anywhere from 4 to 8 hertz. And this has been used in meditation, for creativity, for emotional processing. The recommended time for this would be anywhere from 15 to 45 minutes. So anytime you want to get into meditative state, actually research has shown 20-minute sessions of theta brainwave entertainment improves memory and reduces stress. And that was at the Journal of Neurotherapy in 2009, which is kind of interesting.
That's good to know.
Theta waves,
Thetas,
memory,
okay.
and reduce stress.
Actually, I want to say cats mostly exist alpha. I might have to look that up.
Probably why they're so smart.
But yeah, like they, they have that certain glare to them. Like they're more, like you look into their eyes, you can just see that they exist almost in a different state than other creatures.
Yes.
It's very interesting. I don't trust cats, but that's why. No, I'm kidding.
I think there's something to it. For me, I'm just allergic to them. I like the independent side.
And then there's
things.
that.
Yeah.
So alpha,
Yes.
Doc.
Alpha. So that is anywhere from 8 to 14 hertz. Now, these alpha waves helps promote relaxation, focus, and a sense of well-being. The study in the clinical neurophysiology in 2006 showed anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes. It was ideal for relaxation and mindful breaks, but especially with binaural beats has and showed to improve relaxation and reduce anxiety, which I'm going to get to binaural beats after a bit here.
That's what I use.
Because, there's some awesome effects.
Yeah.
Better use of your time, I think, as well on that one, too. We're going to get into beta frequencies. Now, beta has been broken up into two ranges, one from 14 to 20 hertz, and the other was from 20 to 30 hertz. So low beta waves versus high beta waves. And some of the differences between the low beta, 14 to 20 hertz, showed with more or less alertness, concentration, and active thinking.
I play this a lot.
Really?
I do. I love it. When I'm studying, when I'm reading, when I'm learning, I don't need caffeine.
Beautiful.
Like when I was on a really bad caffeine, we'll call it purge.
Okay.
I would do 4-hour study sessions and not as tired. It would even be end of the day, and I just found I could zone in, and I don't know if memory was truly improved or if it's just because I studied quite a bit to make sure that I passed my things, but I would play it over music.
Wow.
So, because it's tough for me to just listen to the frequency.
Yep.
So I would put on my binaural beats on my computer, and then I'd click play, and then I would keep that at a certain level of volume, and then I'd play music over that, so that I was hearing the frequency. My subconscious was picking it up, but I could still at least pay attention to the music. But yeah, and I could definitely notice a difference. Like I hated just listening to music when I studied now. Like I always, whenever I'm reading or I put it on. Wow. And for me, it is a huge difference for focus, attention, staying on task, making sure I'm reading and not just like flipping page, like that kind of thing. Makes a huge difference.
Ladies and gentlemen, put down your energy drinks and increase those beta waves.
Seriously, man.
That's amazing. Okay, so we know low beta frequencies, alertness, concentration, active thinking. High beta waves from 20 to 30 hertz is shown to increase problem solving and critical thinking, but also linked to stress and anxiety if overactive. Okay, so overstimulation in this range has showed heightened cortisol levels, and that this was actually a study of the International Journal of Biology of Stress in 2003. So 20 to 30 hertz, you might have to pay attention to if you have that going for a period of time, that you might start increasing cortisol levels. This was anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes, especially for cognitive tasks. So if you have to really start thinking, you need all your attention, alertness at that 10 to 30 hertz, 20 minutes, turn it on, go to town, make sure to turn it off from there so it doesn't increase your mood or these cortisol levels. But interesting.
And it's different because I am almost always understimulated.
Really?
So I have a tough time getting overstimulated. So maybe that is why I was able to do this for a long period of time. So everybody's different.
Yes.
You know, if you find that that's something that maybe is overstimulating you, obviously stop doing. But for me, I was able to do it for quite a bit of time. And maybe I practiced, I don't know, but just food for thought. Yeah.
So next is gamma frequency. And this is a range from 30 to 100 hertz. But a huge one that has been studied quite a bit is at 40 hertz, which I think we've talked on previously. But that has effects in terms of improved memory, learning, and mental clarity. And this is at 40 hertz. It's recommended time anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes to stimulate this brain activity to help boost this cognitive function. Even sessions anywhere repeated of 2 or 3 times per week has been showed improved cognitive function in early Alzheimer patients, which is actually a preliminary trial right now using auditory and visual stimulation at 40 hertz for these Alzheimer patients. And they're actually seeing improved neural synchronization, and there's also possible improvements in memory and cognition from there too. So now the other frequency, and this is where there's certain therapeutic effects with all these types of frequency, but specifically they found at 174 hertz was linked to reduced pain and promoted relaxation. Actually started with this one in clinic. Didn't notice too many effects right off the get-go as I was just having it play in the background. I did know when I had this 174 hertz and it was playing through the speakers just like this low hum. After about a half hour, I couldn't think for a son of a gun.
Really?
I mentally was kind of in a weird brain fog. So, I mean, I don't know if it
Numbed you
helped
out.
patients. I was in a blur for a sec. So I'd turn off and I kind of came back to the set.
That's interesting.
So I don't know if it was the specific hertz or if I wasn't used to the sound frequency. I don't know. But they said at 174 hertz, the recommended time was anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes during rest or meditation. So it makes sense to help with pain, promote relaxation. If I'm mentally trying to think and be aware, my body was just probably not liking it.
I wonder if it had some disassociative
That could have been,
effects.
yeah.
You know, obviously with rest and
Makes
meditation,
sense.
you tend to want to get there. That might be because you were trying to fight that because this was
Probably
during the day.
subconsciously.
Yeah.
Like mid-shift.
Right. So you had one brain process trying to go, and then
Man.
that's interesting though.
So the study there that a lot of these came through was a narrative review in healthcare which pretty much discussed physiological and neurological and biochemical mechanisms with these low frequency and sound vibrations. And this was for human health, and that's where a lot of these numbers came from. So that was out of a really, really good study there. Now, as we go into a higher frequency, 432 hertz, 432 hertz has been said to improve harmony, balance, and it's often called the nature's frequency.
I think with nature's frequency, it means the healing tendencies you get when you're in nature.
Okay.
As my guess.
Interesting.
Like we talked about with Sirset, with Lee talking about how he based the entire point of Sirset, which is you could call it not really a frequency. Well, it is a frequency therapy because it uses music, but
Sure.
he based it off of nature because how he felt in nature. So,
Fascinating.
but I think that's what it means.
And I know I didn't have it here, but I saw in previous studies it helped reduce heart rate at that specific frequency
I'm
as
sure.
well, which makes sense for the harmony balance.
I feel like $1,000 when I'm in nature, man.
yeah.
And I think grounding is a whole different, point of podcast. But my mood and my relaxation is incredibly amplified when I'm in nature.
Man, that's beautiful. And I think for some of the people that want to play with some of these, we'll have all the specific hertz, the effects that it has on the screen. So if you guys want to try this out yourself, go to YouTube, just type in whatever frequency you want to hear. So that is 432 hertz, and the recommended time was anywhere from 20 to 60 minutes for relaxation. So you want to go into yoga, you're a yogi, 432 hertz during your session will help with the effects of relaxation and balance as well. Now, going back to the 528 hertz, or the love frequency, and this is the one that I just felt like happy when I was around this machine when I was playing. Apparently it has effects helping with DNA repair, stress reduction, and feelings of harmony. It's better to have this going for 15 to 30 minutes for any of these sessions, but yeah, that was one that's, and even with a study that they, in 2018 study, in Explore journal, they found that it helped reduce oxidative stress in the body, but you wanted to have 2 to 3 times a week to have a cumulative effect with that one. So interesting. And then one of the other last higher frequencies, 963 hertz, which also is known as the crown chakra, has claimed to have enhanced connection to a higher conscious and spiritual connection. This is anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. You usually want to do this in terms of a meditation or spiritual practices. Now, last night I played with this one a little bit, but I also tried a couple different things as well with it. So, and I don't know the connection in terms of light too much, but I had this specific 963 hertz playing in the background, and just randomly came to my mind. I'm thinking, okay, so if I think about anything that is purple, first, I don't know why purple, it just came to me. I'm like, all right, let's try this, and let's try to see if we can connect 2 dots here or this one. And again, this is all just what I perceived at the last night, more or less. But so I started thinking of like purple fog, anything purple that I can think of in my mind, listening to this frequency and just trying to look and almost turn my eyes inwards. I got into this weird meditative state really, really quickly within, I would probably say 5 seconds, to where it was almost like a weird I don't know how to explain it. It was like a weird out-of-body experience to a certain extent. But then some sound, I think Morgan, my wife, was calling for me to help out with chores, and it kind of tuned out of it really quickly. But I want to dive back into it a little bit. Yeah. Whether it's a certain color in which I try to think of, and matched up well with that. But yeah, it was interesting.
That's interesting.
Man. Yeah, I don't know. So then we dive into some of these higher frequencies. Now, this is when we go into some of these higher frequencies, I'm talking more ultrasound, which is greater than 20,000 hertz. And there's different protocols with this one. Ultrasounds sessions can anywhere range from 5 to 30 minutes at a time. And like we said, blood clots and whatnot with that. It also helps a little bit with tissue repair and pain relief. But some of the studies I look at with tissue repair were very minimal and minute, to where when I looked back at that research previously, ultrasound machines, I didn't feel strong at all, honestly, having that therapy done on myself in terms of use of time for a tissue.
I know back in the day it was used immensely. Pretty common therapy you'd find in most musculoskeletal clinics, but I think technology has advanced enough to where that has become outdated. Yeah, for sure.
That's probably very safe to say as well on that one. But going back to actually a study, I'm going to make sure I touch on this one. It was a study called the PLOS or PLOS-1, which investigated inaudible high-frequency sounds on brain activity, suggesting that certain frequencies can differentiate and affect neural responses, known as hypersonic effect. Now, with this, it also showed that the higher frequency had more of an alertness and influence mood as well. But if you're left for longer periods of times with these higher frequency, then it can affect tinnitus or ringing in the ears, and potentially even hearing loss as well.
So it can cause that, is what you're saying?
Yes. Yep. So pay attention to the amount of time where some of these sounds are, and or maybe even certain professions like mechanics with certain machines that they have can emanate a certain frequency. So I think that could also be some of that affecting as well. But is interesting with some of this stuff. But overall, some of like the general recommendations for consistency for any of these hertz, especially in terms of time, would be to have more of like either a daily or bi-weekly sessions to have accumulative effects is where a lot of the research was showing. But making sure to take breaks, because you do want to avoid overexposure for especially greater than an hour, which can have, depending on whatever frequency it is, can have more effects, like we said, with some of these higher frequencies. Pretty much your inner ear picks up these sound frequencies. If it's overactive for so much time, these small ciliae or little hair-like structures in the ear can almost be worn down to not pick up these sounds as much.
Yeah.
So I think that's also where older folk, it's harder for them to hear higher pitch sounds because of the age.
Yeah, I know
aspect.
there's always those sound tests, right, where they play a different frequency, and certain age groups usually start to lose the ability to hear. And as you get, certain frequencies, it's better when you're younger, obviously, because your hearing is better. And then I know that dogs can hear a certain frequency different than humans can even. That's interesting.
Yes, it's very interesting. And then to connect some of these, because I think this is important to know, in terms of a therapeutic setting, I think there's definitely, we need more longitudinal studies and placebo-controlled trials to look at the relationship between these effects. But we know that there is something to this cognitive enhancement, emotional healing, spiritual development, depending on what hertz it is. And based on practitioners and experience and where some of this is coming from, which I think they're, to a certain extent, knowing that side of things is important to consider if you're going to start implementing some of this in a clinical setting. But
We don't have a lot of confidence on protocols, but it doesn't mean that this is a tough thing to experiment with or be worried about.
Yes.
It just might take some experiment with your own self, trying to play around with different frequencies, see what you feel. And it probably will require a little bit of self-awareness and understanding of your own body. And some people respond to these things much more than others. Like,
So true.
I know people who go through these kinds of therapies and don't really see or feel much. And maybe that's just, something to do with how, you're either wired or how you respond to something like this. But then there's some people who can get into a quick meditative trance quite quickly with certain sounds. And it just has to do with maybe where they are in their journey, and they're just more, we'll call it, I have a higher vagal tone and a better nervous system to take in these kinds of sounds. I don't know. Again, it's all theory, but I do know that when I talk to someone who doesn't know much about this or has tried it and maybe didn't like it, and then I talk to someone who's tried it and they've experimented, and we go back and forth because, obviously similar to you and myself, it just,
100%.
it is different. You have to play around with it. You have to get comfortable with either not feeling something at one point because it maybe doesn't work for you, and then switch frequencies and maybe you do. So it's not going to always work, but most of the time, if you can start to play around with it, you'll feel something. And the effects are quite amazing. Like, seriously, it's been fun to play around with.
I can't wait to try even more after looking through some of this material over the last few days. I'm excited to try a few different things as well myself.
So binaural beats, Doc. I love binaural beats. Do you want to talk really quickly on that for patients?
For sure. Now, this is also in relationship to that PLOS1 study as well, but with binaural beats. So binaural, it's appear to occur with two slightly different frequencies, which are presented in each ear, or if you think about it in terms of listening to the sound, one side of a audio speaker will be different from the other side, which your body will perceive that a little differently. But it creates this perception of a third tone, which are believed to influence brainwave activity and potentially affecting then mood, cognition, and relaxation. I think that then goes back to what hertz frequency as well. So with binaural beats, it has pretty much a neurochemical effect to help for a few things. One, dopamine release, which is kind of interesting, associated with relaxation and pleasure. This is also with alpha and theta waves. So if you have binaural beats at a lower frequency at the alpha or theta waves, they'll help with the dopamine release. But let's say we want to help and improve serotonin levels through binaural beats. is where you want to go theta waves from 4 to 8 hertz, which is often, like we said previously, in a meditative state, calm states, and where you want to use that. And then binaural beats also helps in cortisol reduction, especially in alpha 8 to 13 hertz waves, and also even theta ranges as well to help with some of that. Now, let's say we want endorphin release or a feeling of happiness and pleasure listening to binaural beats. That also comes with some of the effects. I don't think it matters too much on the specific hertz frequency, but it kind of comes along with the ride. Same thing with GABA, and also brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, as well. So they're seeing that there could be a possible promotion and improvement in all these areas, but if you want to change the cortisol, serotonin, dopamine release, you might have to change the hertz frequency a little bit with that, with binaural beats, but it just gives us a better understanding from there. So yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit on the caveats and limitations too? Because I think you put some good information in there.
Beautiful. The effects of binaural beats are not always universal. It might be individual, kind of like you brought up as well, and obviously with our experiences, it makes sense. But long-term impacts and mechanisms are not yet understood too much, but binaural beats should not replace medical or psychological treatments for neurochemical imbalances, but may serve as a complementary tool. And I think that's important to know. And thank you for bringing that up, because if someone's thinking that they want to skip certain interventions based on a condition that a person has with sound or certain areas that are not necessarily fully researched heavily, you have to go with what has the better effects and more research back in. So very good point.
Thank you.
But so in terms of how we perceive sound, now sound, it's pretty much a wave generation of how our inner ears collects in this pinna and this external auditory canal, and then the sound goes in and it localizes. So from there, it then moves into the middle ear, the inner ear. There's a bunch of specifics with this, but pretty much a basilar membrane and a hair cells, which going back to those cilia or those small hair follicles within our inner ear, and we pick up sound frequencies in the external environment. They regulate that and create pretty much either high frequencies, which vibrate near the base, or low frequencies, which vibrate near the apex of this basilar membrane. And then they pick these sensory receptors pick up this signal, and then it's activated through a chemical pathway where it's like depolarized, and there's a bunch of neurotransmitters as well that help activate this whole chemical sequence. And then we pick up that signal. That signal then goes to a spiral ganglion neuron in this auditory nerve and our cranial nerve 8. So auditory pathways, and the part that I wanted to bring up on how we perceive it. The cochlear nucleus, which is in the medulla, receives initial input from the auditory nerve. Other impact in connection is the superior olivary complex, that is in the brainstem, and that processes sound localization, or where you perceive sound in the environment. The inferior colliculus, which is also in the midbrain, that integrates auditory information and a reflex response. So let's say something surprising happens, like a train's coming, or you hear something that's coming at you that could be perceived as a danger. That reflex of hearing that sound, that is where it picks up in the midbrain.
And that's the startle reflex.
Startle reflex. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then the medial geniculate nucleus, which is in the thymus, that acts as a relay station to the cortex. There's also a primary auditory cortex, which is in the temporal lobe, and that interprets sound characteristics like pitch, volume, rhythm. So the more to get to your cortex, there's a memory aspect in terms of the past experiences you've had. You can not only remember the smell, you can not only remember the vision of actually what happened and took place, but you can also remember the sound, which is kind of interesting through how everything kind of relates through it. So there's a bunch of different nerve pathways and how we pick up the sound and how it's all kind of being perceived in through our body and
Yeah.
how it helps our actions.
It is
as well.
interesting that we can remember sound.
Yes.
We can remember something that we're not hearing at that time, but we can hear it to ourselves in our brain. Our brain can play that to us. I just think that's so crazy.
There's so much with that, man. Anywhere from physiological effects to helping the autonomic nervous system, whether it's listening to music and having an actual, whether it's a hormonal effect or just a feeling of either fight or flight, and like music gets you going, like the higher, louder, more of a upbeat
Yep.
music helps versus a calming, which then can aid in the parasympathetic rest and digest a little bit more. Even just the vibrational effects of like those low frequency sounds and micro vibrations can help for anywhere from tissue repair to inflammation, promote skin relief. But I think there's definitely more research that needs to be done on that side, quite a bit. But whether it's helping from stress reduction, enhanced focus, creativity, to sleep enhancement, like we said, it's actually interesting. It actually has improved immune function, and that is through lowering cortisol levels, which, like we said, overall, which can also help being resilient to certain conditions as we go through. So, yeah, interesting with some of this stuff. But
So, Doc, I want to know more about the humming you talked about
Yeah.
with tinnitus. I know a lot of people struggle with tinnitus, and just like we talked about the tuning fork thing,
Yes.
matching. Again, I'll have you talk more about it, but that was interesting to me when you brought that up.
I love that. And I started playing with this, and I heard and came across some of this research. Oh gosh, it was a year ago, and that kind of just went back into it. Didn't play with it too much that I just heard of it, but now humming and the use of humming for ringing in the ears and tinnitus relief, what they're saying is anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes of humming, and you're actually focusing on your humming, can help with the re-regulation of these small hairs which pick up the vibrational frequency in the environment to help for this almost a miscommunication between the inner ear and those different cilia to the brain and all these other brain centers. And like we said, there's a bunch of different ones that are connected from our inner ear to our brain centers, but it can help significantly aid in the relief of ringing the ears, but you have to stay consistent, and these are just potential effects, but this doesn't necessarily help for hearing loss or any neurological factors, so you have to take that into consideration. But overall, for tinnitus relief, it's a strong possibility.
So this was roughly 5 to 10 minutes a day, and then you have to be consistent, obviously.
Yes.
And then it just depends on the tone you hum in. Unfortunately, we don't know too much. We don't know too much.
Exactly.
But I'd be curious to know if you got to start to play around with it, if you should, be humming in a more lower tone or a higher tone. But
I think it's almost...
I mean, if I had tinnitus, which I've actually dealt with tinnitus, not constantly, but intermittently, but this is something I don't care. I would try because I know how much it can be. It's just bothersome. So I'd play around. I don't care. I'd do it every day, and I would just hum any tone, and I just find which one maybe works best for me. But some people out there, they're trying everything for tinnitus, and nothing's working, unfortunately. But that's super interesting when you brought that up.
Yeah, I think even going back to the point you made in terms of does it matter the pitch or the rhythm?
Yeah.
I think for the communication from the inner ear to the brain, those brain centers, the more variability I think can help more so. So hum your favorite song maybe.
Yeah.
I think that can have a positive effect. But yeah, play around with it a little bit. I know the person or a couple people that I saw that had a positive experience with this, they said they were at it every single day for, I think it was 10 minutes for them. They started noticing less ringing in their ears after, it was either a couple weeks or a couple months of it, but then they stopped for a while, and then the effects stayed for them to where they still didn't have the ring. It didn't come back.
So it was more of just maybe a miscommunication. And once that it was relieved, there was no further symptoms.
Potentially,
symptoms. Yeah, potentially, of course.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
So yeah, as we go through all this stuff, man, there's just so many small subtleties that
I feel like we definitely could have hit on more, but
there's a lot.
we did our best, I'll tell you that much. And then, of course, light, a huge part of kind of this topic, I guess you could call it, but we might save that for another day. So with that, guys, thank you so much. We appreciate you guys listening to this. This has been fun for us to just dive into, and so hopefully this was all valuable for you. We took everything we could from past experience, anecdotal to empirical, and we just hope it was super valuable for you guys today. So please let us know what you think. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Share this with anyone that you feel is going to be a help and value too. Until next time, guys, we'll see you later.
Disclaimer: the content provided in this health podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast is solely at your own risk. The creators and hosts of this podcast are not responsible for any actions or decisions you may take based on the information presented.
Thanks for joining us on The Functional Code. For more evidence-based health insights, subscribe, rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. Remember, your journey to a healthier you begins with understanding the functional code. Until next time, stay well, stay informed, and embrace the science of living